Before Chinedu could react, Ada collapsed. The bowl of rice crashed onto the floor. For a second, the house fell into a terrifying silence. Then panic exploded. "Ada!" Chinedu rushed to her side, dropping to his knees beside her. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. His heart began pounding violently. "Ada! Can you hear me?" She didn't respond. In Lagos, success had a sound. It hummed in the endless traffic along the third mainland bridge. It echoed in the impatient horns of Danfo buses and the distant roar of generators during power outages. It shimmered in the glass towers of Victoria Island, where deals were signed and fortunes were built. For Chinedu Okoye, that sound had become the rhythm of his life. At 38, Chinedu had built something many men only dreamed about. His logistics company, Okoye Freight Solutions, had grown from a small 2-truck operation into a respected business handling cargo shipments across Nigeria and West Africa. Containers moved through the ports of Apapa, bearing his company's name. Contracts with international partners filled his office shelves. People described him in many ways. Brilliant businessman. Focused. Unstoppable. But those who truly knew him understood something else. Chinedu was not driven by pride. He was driven by survival. Years earlier, he had lived in a cramped apartment in Mushin with his parents and 3 younger siblings. His father worked as a commercial driver who returned home each evening with tired eyes and dusty clothes. His mother sold cooked food near the bus park, standing for hours under the harsh sun. Money was never enough. Some nights electricity disappeared. Other nights the family ate simple meals and laughed loudly to hide the quiet worry hanging in the room. Chinedu learned early that life did not reward comfort. It rewarded determination. While other boys spent their afternoons playing football in the streets, Chinedu often sat with borrowed books, studying business magazines he collected from roadside stalls. He read about companies, trade routes, investments. He watched the world carefully. And somewhere deep inside him, a decision formed. One day, he would rise above the struggle that surrounded him. Years passed. University brought new opportunities, but also new pressures. Chinedu studied business administration while taking small jobs to support himself. Some nights he slept only a few hours before waking early to attend lectures. After graduation, he refused to settle for an ordinary job. Instead, he borrowed money from relatives and bought his first used truck. It broke down 3 times within the first month. But Chinedu refused to quit. He drove cargo himself, negotiated contracts, learned every corner of the transportation business. Slowly, painfully, the company began to grow. 1 truck became 2. 2 became 5. By the time he turned 35, Okoye Freight Solutions had become a respected name in logistics. Yet, despite the success surrounding him, something important remained missing from Chinedu's life: companionship. Many people assumed a wealthy businessman like him must have a glamorous romantic life. The truth was different. Chinedu had dated before, but the relationships rarely lasted long. Some women seemed more interested in the lifestyle his success offered than in the man himself. Luxury dinners, weekend trips, expensive gifts. After a while, it became difficult to tell who truly cared about him and who simply admired the life he had built. So Chinedu focused on work. His house in Lekki was large and comfortable, but often quiet. At night, he sometimes sat on the balcony overlooking the city lights, wondering if success was supposed to feel more satisfying than it did. It was during one of those busy seasons of work that something unexpected happened. One evening, a business partner invited him to attend a charity fundraiser held at a hotel in Victoria Island. The event supported an organization that helped street children receive education and shelter. Chinedu normally avoided social gatherings unless they involved business, but that evening, he decided to attend. The hotel ballroom glowed with soft lights and elegant decorations. Guests dressed in formal clothing moved through the room, holding glasses of wine and engaging in polite conversation. Music played quietly in the background. Chinedu stood near one of the tall windows, observing the room with the same calm attention he used in business meetings. Then he noticed her. She stood near the registration table, speaking with one of the event volunteers. Her name tag read Ada. There was nothing loud about her appearance. She wore a simple navy blue dress and her hair was neatly styled, falling gently across her shoulders. But something about her presence drew attention without effort. She carried herself with quiet confidence, and when she smiled, it felt genuine. Chinedu found himself watching her longer than he intended. At one point, she glanced toward him and caught him looking. Instead of appearing uncomfortable, she simply smiled politely before returning to her work. Later in the evening, Chinedu approached the registration table to make a donation. Ada greeted him warmly. "Good evening, sir. Thank you for supporting the foundation." Her voice was calm and steady. Chinedu handed over the donation envelope. "It's a good cause," he replied. Ada nodded. "Every child deserves a chance to become something greater than their circumstances." The sentence caught Chinedu's attention. It sounded like something he might have said himself. "Do you work with the organization?" he asked. "Yes," Ada replied. "I help coordinate events and outreach programs." There was no attempt to impress him. No nervous excitement at meeting a wealthy donor, just simple honesty. Their conversation lasted only a few minutes, but something about it stayed with Chinedu after the event ended. Days later, he found himself thinking about her again. Eventually, he contacted the charity office, offering to sponsor a transportation program for their outreach efforts. Ada was assigned as the coordinator. That was how their real conversations began. At first, their meetings were professional. They discussed logistics for transporting supplies to different communities. Chinedu's company provided vehicles while the foundation organized volunteers and materials. But gradually, the conversations expanded. They spoke about life, about childhood, about ambition. Ada listened carefully when Chinedu spoke about his early struggles. She never interrupted or tried to compete with her own stories. She simply listened. And when she spoke, her words carried quiet wisdom. "You built your life through determination," she once told him. "But don't forget that success is easier to enjoy when someone shares it with you." Chinedu laughed softly at the time, but her words lingered in his mind. Months passed. Friendship slowly grew into something deeper. Ada never demanded luxury or attention. She seemed comfortable with simple moments, evening walks, quiet dinners, long conversations about the future. That difference made Chinedu feel something he had not felt in years. Peace. Eventually, he realized something surprising. He trusted her. So one evening, during a quiet dinner at a small restaurant overlooking the Lagos Lagoon, Chinedu reached into his jacket pocket. Inside was a small ring box. Ada looked at him with curiosity. Chinedu took a deep breath. "Ada," he said gently, "life has given me success, but it hasn't given me you until now." She watched him quietly. "I don't want to build the rest of my life alone." He opened the box. "Will you marry me?" For a moment, Ada seemed unable to speak. Then tears filled her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. Their wedding the following year was beautiful. Friends, family members, and business partners filled the church. Music echoed through the celebration hall as laughter and dancing lasted late into the night. People whispered admiration as they watched the couple. "They look perfect together." Chinedu believed the same. For the first time in years, his house no longer felt empty. Ada brought warmth into every room. She supported his work, encouraged his ambitions, and filled their home with calm energy that balanced his busy life. To Chinedu, marrying Ada felt like destiny finally rewarding his long years of struggle. And for 3 years, their marriage seemed peaceful, stable, happy. Until the night everything began to change. Was in the kitchen preparing dinner. The soft scent of fried plantain and peppered chicken drifted through the house, making Chinedu smile as he loosened his tie and sat down in the living room. The television murmured quietly in the background, but he wasn't paying attention. Instead, he watched Ada moving around the kitchen. There was something calming about her presence. She moved gracefully, humming a soft tune as she cooked, occasionally glancing toward him with a gentle smile. Moments like this reminded Chinedu why he valued their marriage so deeply. Life had become calmer since Ada entered it, less lonely. "Dinner will be ready soon," Ada called from the kitchen. "No rush," Chinedu replied. "Today has already been a good day." Ada laughed lightly. "That means the business world has decided to give you peace for one evening." "For now," Chinedu said with a grin. The sound of plates being arranged followed, and soon Ada walked into the dining area carrying a bowl of steaming rice. But as she placed the bowl on the table, something strange happened. Ada paused. Her hand rested briefly against the edge of the table as if she suddenly needed support. Chinedu noticed immediately. "Ada?" She blinked slowly. "I'm fine," she said softly. But the words didn't sound convincing. Ada reached for the back of a chair, steadying herself. Then the room began to spin. Her vision blurred, and a sudden wave of dizziness rushed through her body. Before Chinedu could react, Ada collapsed. The bowl of rice crashed onto the floor. For a second, the house fell into a terrifying silence. Then panic exploded. "Ada!" Chinedu rushed to her side, dropping to his knees beside her. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. His heart began pounding violently. "Ada, can you hear me?" She didn't respond. A cold wave of fear surged through him. Without hesitation, Chinedu lifted her into his arms and rushed outside. His car keys trembled in his hands as he unlocked the vehicle and gently laid her across the back seat. The engine roared to life. Within seconds, the car sped out of the compound and into the busy Lagos night. Traffic lights blurred as Chinedu drove faster than he normally would, weaving through vehicles with desperate urgency. "Stay with me," he whispered repeatedly, glancing back at Ada in the rearview mirror. Her chest rose and fell weakly. Each breath felt painfully slow. Every second stretched into an eternity. Finally, the bright lights of the hospital appeared ahead. Chinedu pulled into the emergency entrance and jumped out before the car fully stopped. "Help!" he shouted. Two nurses rushed forward with a stretcher. Together, they lifted Ada from the car and wheeled her quickly through the hospital doors. Chinedu followed closely behind as doctors moved swiftly around her. "Pulse weak," one nurse said. "Blood pressure dropping," another reported. The medical team pushed the stretcher into the emergency ward while Chinedu was stopped at the entrance. "Sir, please wait here," a nurse told him gently. "But they need space to work." The doors closed. And just like that, Chinedu was alone in the hallway. The bright hospital lights suddenly felt too harsh. The air smelled strongly of antiseptic. Somewhere down the corridor, a machine beeped steadily. Chinedu paced back and forth, his thoughts racing. What had happened? Ada had seemed perfectly fine only minutes earlier. She wasn't sick. She hadn't complained about feeling unwell. So why had she collapsed? Minutes turned into nearly an hour. Each passing second deepened the knot of anxiety tightening in Chinedu's chest. Finally, the emergency room doors opened. A middle-aged doctor stepped out, removing his gloves. "Mr. Okoye?" he asked. "Yes," Chinedu replied quickly. The doctor approached him calmly. "Your wife is stable for now," he said. Chinedu exhaled with relief. "Thank God." "She fainted due to sudden weakness and dehydration," the doctor explained. "But we are running additional tests to understand what caused the episode." Chinedu nodded. "Can I see her?" "Soon," the doctor said. But instead of leaving, the doctor hesitated. There was something thoughtful in his expression. "Sir," he said carefully, "we need to ask you a few medical questions about your wife." Chinedu frowned slightly. "Of course." The doctor glanced briefly at the medical chart in his hand. "Has your wife undergone any major surgeries in the past?" Chinedu thought for a moment. "No," he answered confidently. "Not that I'm aware of." The doctor nodded slowly. "Has she ever mentioned long-term medical treatments or hormone therapy?" Chinedu blinked. "Hormone therapy?" "Yes." Chinedu shook his head. "No. Nothing like that." The doctor looked down at the chart again. His expression became slightly more serious. "Some aspects of her medical examination appear unusual," he said. Chinedu felt a small ripple of confusion. "What do you mean?" The doctor paused. "We are still reviewing her medical history and running further tests," he said carefully. "It's possible there are details in her past medical records that we need to understand better." Chinedu tried to process the information. "But Ada has always been healthy," he said. "I understand," the doctor replied. "Have you been married long?" 3 years. The doctor nodded slowly. "Sometimes patients have medical histories their spouses are not fully aware of," he said gently. "We simply want to make sure we have the complete information so we can treat her properly." Chinedu forced a small nod. "Of course." But inside his mind, something strange had already begun to form, a quiet uneasiness. The doctor gave a reassuring smile. "For now, she is resting. You'll be able to see her shortly." With that, he walked back toward the emergency ward. Chinedu remained standing in the hallway. His thoughts felt unusually heavy. At first, he told himself there was nothing to worry about. Hospitals often asked complicated questions. Doctors were trained to investigate every possibility. Still, the doctor's hesitation lingered in his mind. The phrase echoed repeatedly in his thoughts. Unusual medical records. What could that possibly mean? Eventually, a nurse returned and guided Chinedu into a recovery room. Ada lay on the hospital bed, her face pale but peaceful. An IV line rested in her arm while a monitor beside the bed displayed her steady heartbeat. Chinedu moved closer and sat beside her. Relief washed over him. She was safe. After a few minutes, Ada slowly opened her eyes. "Chinedu," she murmured weakly. "I'm here," he said softly, taking her hand. "What happened?" "You fainted," he replied. "But the doctors say you'll be fine." Ada nodded slightly. She looked tired. Very tired. Chinedu squeezed her hand gently. "You scared me," he admitted quietly. Ada gave a faint smile. "I'm sorry." The moment felt peaceful again. Yet somewhere deep in Chinedu's mind, the doctor's earlier questions continued to echo. Something about them didn't feel normal, and although he didn't realize it yet, that night had quietly opened the door to a truth he had never imagined. The hospital discharged Ada 2 days later. The doctors said her condition had stabilized. They recommended rest, better hydration, and a few follow-up medical tests just to be safe. Nothing about their explanations sounded alarming enough to cause serious concern. Yet something about the experience lingered in Chinedu's mind. It wasn't Ada's fainting. People fainted sometimes. Stress, dehydration, exhaustion. Life in Lagos could easily cause such things. What stayed with him was the doctor's hesitation. The questions. The way the doctor had paused before speaking, as if choosing his words carefully. At first, Chinedu tried to ignore it. Life returned to its usual rhythm. His company demanded attention again, and shipments arriving at the Apapa port required his supervision. Chinedu began watching Ada more carefully, not intentionally at first. Just small observations. Ada seemed normal when she returned home. She rested for a few days, moving slowly around the house while recovering her strength. She laughed at his attempts to cook breakfast and teased him gently when he burned toast in the kitchen. "Stick to running your company," she joked. "Cooking may destroy the entire house." Chinedu laughed. But beneath the laughter, something inside him had shifted. He began noticing small details he had never questioned before. Ada rarely spoke about her childhood. Whenever conversations drifted toward family memories, she would smile politely but redirect the topic. "Did you used to visit your grandparents often?" Chinedu asked one evening while they sat together watching television. Ada hesitated slightly. "Not really," she replied. "My childhood was quiet." The answer felt incomplete. Chinedu nodded slowly but said nothing. Days passed. Another small moment happened during a weekend visit from Chinedu's younger sister, Ngozi. Ngozi had always liked Ada. The two women usually chatted easily, sharing stories and laughter in the living room. But that afternoon, while looking through an old photo album of Chinedu's family pictures, Ngozi asked a simple question. "Ada, do you have childhood photos too? I've never seen any." The room became strangely quiet. Ada smiled gently. "I lost most of them years ago," she said calmly. Ngozi shrugged. "That happens sometimes." But Chinedu noticed something. Ada's smile had been slightly forced, the kind of smile people used when avoiding a deeper conversation. That night, while Ada slept beside him, Chinedu stared at the ceiling. His thoughts moved slowly through the memories of their 3 years together. He realized something unsettling. Chinedu turned his head and looked at Ada sleeping peacefully beside him. Her breathing was steady, her face calm. The woman he loved, the woman he had trusted. Yet suddenly he realized how many chapters of her life he had never read. Over the next week, his curiosity grew stronger. One evening, while they were having dinner, he asked another question. "Ada, where exactly did you attend secondary school?" Ada paused. Her fork hovered slightly above the plate. Then she lowered it slowly. "Abuja," she replied. Chinedu waited. But she didn't continue. "What was the school called?" he asked gently. Ada looked at him for a moment. "Just a small private school," she said. "Nothing special." The answer felt strangely vague. Chinedu felt a quiet tension forming inside his chest. He wasn't accusing her of anything. But something about her responses seemed incomplete, as if parts of her story were being carefully hidden. That night, Ada fell asleep earlier than usual. Chinedu remained awake in the living room, staring at his laptop screen but not really working. His mind wrestled with an uncomfortable thought. Am I imagining things? Maybe he was overthinking. Perhaps Ada simply preferred privacy about her past. Many people did. Still, the doctor's words returned again. Unusual medical records. Finally, Chinedu stood up. His heart beat slightly faster as he walked toward their bedroom. He didn't plan to invade Ada's privacy. At least, that was what he told himself. But curiosity had grown stronger than restraint. He quietly opened the bedroom door. Ada slept peacefully, her breathing soft in the dim light. Chinedu moved carefully across the room. Near Ada's side of the wardrobe stood a small wooden drawer cabinet. One drawer had always remained locked. He had noticed it before, but never asked about it. Now he stood in front of it. His hand hovered above the handle. This is wrong, he thought. But another voice answered. What if something is wrong? After a long moment, he pulled gently. The drawer did not move. Locked. Chinedu sighed. He stepped away, frustrated with himself. But then something caught his eye. A small key rested on the bedside table. His stomach tightened. Perhaps Ada had simply forgotten to move it. Or perhaps she never expected anyone to use it. Chinedu hesitated again, then slowly picked up the key. His hands felt strangely heavy as he inserted it into the drawer lock. The soft click echoed loudly in the quiet room. For a moment, Chinedu froze. Ada shifted slightly in her sleep but did not wake. Carefully, he opened the drawer. Inside were neatly arranged documents, medical papers, identification cards, a few sealed envelopes. Chinedu lifted the first document. It appeared to be an old medical report. Another document followed. Then another. His confusion deepened as he read unfamiliar terminology. Hormonal treatments, surgical consultations, medical evaluations from years earlier. His heart began beating faster. None of these records had ever been mentioned. Then he saw it. A certificate issued many years ago. The document carried Ada's photograph, but the name printed beside the photo was different. It was not Ada. It was a male name. Chinedu felt the world around him suddenly become very quiet. His eyes returned to the name again. He read it twice, then 3 times. The letters did not change. His mind struggled to understand what he was seeing. Slowly, memories from the hospital returned. The doctor's careful questions, the unusual medical records. Chinedu lowered the paper slowly. His hands trembled. For several long seconds, he simply sat there, staring at the documents inside the drawer. His entire understanding of the past 3 years suddenly felt fragile. The woman sleeping peacefully beside him, the woman he loved, had once lived a completely different life, a life he had never known. Chinedu closed the drawer quietly and locked it again. Then he walked slowly toward the window. Outside, Lagos continued moving. Cars passed. Distant horns sounded. The city did not know that inside this quiet bedroom, a man's world had just begun to fracture. Chinedu stared into the darkness, and for the first time since the hospital night, he realized something. The truth he was beginning to uncover would change everything. Chinedu did not sleep that night. After closing the drawer and returning the key exactly where he had found it, he remained standing beside the bedroom window for a long time. The cool night breeze slipped through the slightly open curtains, carrying distant sounds from the Lagos streets below. Cars moved along the expressway like restless insects. Somewhere nearby, a generator hummed steadily. But inside the room, everything felt strangely silent. Chinedu stared into the darkness, his mind replaying the document he had seen in the drawer. The photograph had clearly been Ada. The same eyes, the same face. But the name beside the picture had not been Ada. It had been a man's name. Even now, Chinedu could see the letters clearly in his memory. He pressed his hands against his temples, trying to slow the storm of thoughts racing through his mind. Maybe there was some explanation. Maybe the document belonged to someone else. Maybe it was simply an old administrative mistake. But the medical records had been there too. Hormonal treatment reports, surgical consultations, medical evaluations stretching back many years. The evidence had not been vague. It had been painfully clear. Chinedu turned and looked at Ada sleeping on the bed. Her breathing remained steady, peaceful. The same woman he had shared 3 years of marriage with. The same woman who laughed with him during quiet dinners and supported him during difficult business negotiations. The same woman who had comforted him when his father passed away 2 years earlier. Everything about her had always felt genuine. Yet now, Chinedu realized something unsettling. He had never truly known the beginning of her story. Morning arrived slowly. When the first sunlight crept into the room, Chinedu was already dressed for the day. He moved quietly around the house, making coffee in the kitchen and staring absently at the rising steam from the cup in his hands. His thoughts had settled into one painful certainty. He could not ignore what he had seen. Ada deserved the chance to explain, and he deserved the truth. When Ada entered the kitchen later that morning, she looked rested. "Good morning," she said gently. Chinedu forced a small smile. "Morning." She noticed the untouched coffee sitting on the counter. "You woke up early." "I couldn't sleep much," he admitted. Ada studied his face carefully. "You look tired. Is something wrong?" Chinedu hesitated. Part of him wanted to avoid the conversation completely, but another part knew that silence would only make things worse. "Ada," he said quietly, "can we talk later tonight?" She nodded. "Of course." But the concern in her eyes deepened. The entire day passed slowly. At work, Chinedu struggled to focus. He sat through meetings without hearing half of what his managers were discussing. Documents lay open on his desk while his thoughts drifted elsewhere. Several times he considered leaving the office early, but he forced himself to finish the day. Whatever conversation awaited him that evening would require calmness and strength. When Chinedu returned home, the house felt unusually quiet. Ada was sitting in the living room reading a book. She looked up when he entered. "You wanted to talk," she said softly. Chinedu nodded. "Come sit with me." They moved to the dining table. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them like a fragile thread. Finally, Chinedu reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single document, the one he had quietly taken from the drawer before leaving that morning. He placed it gently on the table. "Ada," he said slowly, "I found this." Ada's eyes moved toward the paper. The moment she saw it, her entire expression changed. Her face froze. Her breathing slowed. For a long time, she did not speak. Chinedu watched her carefully. "Ada," he repeated quietly, "explain this to me." She picked up the document with trembling fingers. Her eyes scanned the page. Then she closed them briefly. When she opened them again, they were filled with tears. "You went through my drawer," she said softly. "Yes." Her shoulders lowered slightly. The secret she had protected for so long had suddenly stepped into the light. "There's something about my past I was afraid to tell you," she whispered. Chinedu's voice remained steady. "I'm listening." Ada stared down at the document again. "My name wasn't always Ada," she said quietly. The words hung in the air. "I was born different from the person you know today." Chinedu felt his chest tighten. "I transitioned many years before we met." The room felt suddenly smaller. The walls seemed closer, the air heavier. Chinedu leaned back in his chair slowly, absorbing the weight of her confession. For 3 years, he had believed he understood the woman he married. Now he realized an entire chapter of her life had been hidden. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. Ada wiped tears from her eyes. "Because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of losing everything." Her voice trembled. "When we met, I had already spent years building a new life. I had changed my identity, moved away from my past, and started over." She looked at him carefully. "You saw me as a woman. You treated me with kindness and respect. I didn't want that to disappear." Chinedu stared at the table. "So you decided to hide the truth?" Ada's voice broke. "I didn't plan to hide it forever." "Then when were you planning to tell me?" She hesitated. "I kept telling myself I would find the right moment." And 3 years passed. Silence returned again. Chinedu stood and walked slowly toward the window. Outside, Lagos traffic moved endlessly along the road. The city continued its busy life, unaware that inside this quiet house, a marriage was shaking. Chinedu's mind replayed every memory of their relationship. Their first meeting, their wedding, the nights they laughed together, the comfort they had shared. None of those moments had felt fake. But now they were surrounded by a truth he had never been given the chance to understand. Behind him, Ada spoke again. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said quietly. Chinedu did not turn around. "But you did." Her voice fell silent. "I loved you," she continued softly. "And I still do." Chinedu finally turned. "I don't doubt that." He walked back toward the table slowly. "But love without truth is fragile." Ada lowered her head. "I know." The room filled with the heavy stillness of 2 people standing at the edge of a broken understanding. 3 years of marriage. 3 years of shared life. And now the truth had finally stepped forward. Nothing about their relationship would ever look the same again. The house felt different after that night. Not physically different. Every room remained the same, every piece of furniture exactly where it had always been. But the atmosphere had changed in a way that neither Chinedu nor Ada could ignore. Silence had moved in. The silence wasn't loud or angry. It was quiet and heavy, like a cloud that followed them from room to room. For the first time since their marriage began, their home no longer felt like a place of comfort. It felt like a place of questions. The morning after the confession, Chinedu woke early and left the house before Ada had even stepped out of bed. He didn't slam doors or create a scene. He simply moved quietly through the hallway, grabbed his keys, and drove away. Ada heard the sound of the gate opening, then closing, and the house returned to silence. She sat up slowly on the bed, her heart already aching. The truth she had hidden for years was finally out. There was no hiding now, no pretending, only consequences. Across the city, Chinedu drove without paying much attention to where he was going. The roads of Lagos were already filling with the usual morning chaos. Buses stopping suddenly, motorcycles weaving between cars, vendors calling out to passing drivers. But the noise of the city felt distant to him. His mind was somewhere else. Every memory of the last 3 years had begun replaying in his head like scenes from a film. The night he proposed to Ada, the laughter during their wedding celebration, the evenings they spent talking about the future. Had those moments been real? Or had they been built on a lie? The question refused to leave him alone. Eventually, Chinedu parked near the waterfront in Victoria Island. The Atlantic Ocean stretched endlessly ahead, waves crashing softly against the shore. He stepped out of the car and walked toward the railing, resting his hands against the metal bar. The salty wind touched his face. He closed his eyes. Part of him felt angry. Not the loud kind of anger that demanded shouting or confrontation, a quieter anger, the kind that grew slowly from betrayal. Ada had known the truth from the very beginning. She had chosen not to share it. 3 years of marriage, 3 years of trust, and yet the most important part of her past had remained hidden. But another part of Chinedu's heart refused to see everything in simple black and white. Because Ada had not been a cruel person. She had not treated him with disrespect. In fact, she had done the opposite. She had supported him during difficult business negotiations. She had encouraged him when he doubted himself. She had cared for his mother when she fell ill. She had been present during the hardest moments of his life. Those memories were real. They could not be erased simply because the past had been hidden. Chinedu sighed deeply. The conflict inside him felt like 2 voices arguing endlessly. One voice said, "She lied to you." The other said, "She was afraid." By the time evening arrived, Chinedu returned home. Ada was sitting quietly in the living room when he entered. She looked up as he walked through the door, but neither of them spoke immediately. Her eyes searched his face carefully. He looked tired, emotionally exhausted. Chinedu placed his keys on the table and sat down across from her. For a long moment, the silence between them stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Ada spoke. "I know you have every reason to be angry," she said softly. Chinedu leaned back in the chair. "Angry isn't even the right word," he replied. "What is the right word?" He thought for a moment. "Confused?" Ada nodded slowly. "That's fair." Chinedu studied her face. "You had 3 years to tell me the truth." "I know. But you didn't." Ada looked down at her hands. "Because I was terrified." Chinedu frowned slightly. "Terrified of what?" "Of losing you." The words came out quietly, but their weight filled the room. "When we first met," Ada continued, "I had already spent years trying to rebuild my life. My family had rejected me. Friends disappeared. I had to start over completely. Her voice trembled slightly. I moved to a new city. I changed my identity legally. I worked hard just to live a normal life. Chinedu listened carefully. And when you met me, he asked. Ada looked up. You treated me like a person, she said. Not like a problem. Not like a mistake. Her eyes filled with tears again. You saw me as a woman, and for the first time in years, I believed maybe my life could be normal. Chinedu remained silent. I kept telling myself I would tell you the truth one day, she continued. But every time I tried, fear stopped me. Fear of rejection. Ada nodded. Yes. She wiped her eyes gently. I know what it feels like to lose everything once. I didn't think I could survive losing it again. Chinedu stood and walked slowly across the room. He stopped near the window, staring outside just as he had the night before. Cars moved along the road. Streetlights flickered on. Life outside continued normally. But inside the house, everything felt uncertain. Behind him, Ada spoke again. You have every right to walk away from this marriage, she said quietly. Chinedu turned slightly. I wouldn't blame you. Her voice was calm, but there was sadness behind it. I deceived you, she admitted. Chinedu returned to the chair and sat down again. He looked at her carefully. You didn't just deceive me, he said. You built an entire life with me while hiding the truth. Ada nodded slowly. I know. But here's the part I don't understand, Chinedu continued. What part? Everything else about our marriage has been real. Ada looked confused. You've supported me, respected me, stood beside me through difficult times. That's because I love you, she said softly. Chinedu studied her for a long moment. I believe that, he admitted. The confession surprised even him, because despite the betrayal, he could not deny something important. Ada's love had never felt fake. It had always been present, consistent, genuine. That realization made his decision even harder. He leaned forward slightly. Ada, do you understand the position you've placed me in? She nodded slowly. Yes. I feel betrayed, he said. I know. But I also remember the woman who stood beside me for 3 years. Ada said nothing. Tears rolled quietly down her cheeks. I don't know what happens next. Chinedu continued. His voice was calm but uncertain. I don't know if this marriage can survive the truth. The words hung heavily in the room. But before Ada could respond, he added something else. But I do know one thing. She looked up. I can't make a decision based only on anger. Ada held her breath. Chinedu exhaled slowly. Because the truth is, I loved you before I knew this. And that complicated everything. For several days after their difficult conversation, life inside the Okoye house moved slowly. Not with arguments, not with shouting, but with a careful quietness, as if both Chinedu and Ada were walking across fragile glass. They spoke politely when necessary. Simple things. Have you eaten? Are you going to the office today? Do you need anything from the store? But the deeper conversation, the one that would determine the future of their marriage, remained unfinished. Chinedu needed time, and Ada understood that. Each morning he left for work earlier than usual. Each evening he returned home later than before. Sometimes he sat alone in his study long after midnight, staring at documents he wasn't truly reading. His mind kept circling the same question. What does love mean when truth arrives late? On the 4th evening after Ada's confession, Chinedu stood on the balcony of their house overlooking the quiet Lekki street below. The night air carried the faint smell of rain. Clouds hung low across the sky, reflecting the orange glow of distant streetlights. The city still buzzed in the distance, but here the neighborhood felt calm. He rested his hands on the balcony railing. For most of his life, Chinedu had believed decisions should be simple. You examine the facts, you weigh the consequences, you choose the path that makes the most sense. Business worked that way, but life was not business, and marriage certainly wasn't. His thoughts drifted back through the years. The first time he met Ada at the charity event, the way she listened when he spoke about his childhood struggles, the calm way she supported him during the early expansion of his company, the nights they stayed up late talking about dreams and plans for the future. Those memories had always felt genuine. They still did. Yet another truth now existed beside them. Ada had hidden a major part of her life. She had made the decision for him, and that betrayal could not simply be ignored. Chinedu closed his eyes briefly. Inside him, two forces continued to argue. One demanded justice. She lied. The other whispered something softer. She was afraid. The more he thought about it, the more he realized something important. Ada had not hidden her past to manipulate him. She had hidden it to protect the life she had finally built. Fear had guided her decision. Fear of rejection. Fear of loneliness. Fear of losing the one person who had treated her with acceptance. That fear had been wrong, but it had also been human. Behind him, the sliding balcony door opened quietly. Ada stepped outside. She moved slowly, as if unsure whether she was welcome. Chinedu heard her footsteps, but did not turn immediately. She stood beside him, leaving a respectful distance between them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city lights flickered softly in the distance. Finally, Ada broke the silence. "I've been thinking a lot these past few days," she said quietly. Chinedu nodded. "So have I." Ada clasped her hands together nervously. "I know you're trying to decide whether our marriage should continue." Chinedu turned slightly toward her. "I am." Ada looked down at the ground. "I want you to know something." "What is it?" "I won't fight you if you decide to leave." Chinedu frowned slightly. Ada continued. "You deserve honesty in your life. If staying with me feels like living inside a lie, then I don't want to force you to carry that burden." Her voice remained steady, but her eyes were filled with quiet pain. "I would rather lose this marriage than keep you trapped in resentment." The words surprised him. Chinedu studied her face carefully. For the first time since the truth had been revealed, Ada did not look defensive. She looked resigned, as if she had already accepted the possibility that everything might end. Chinedu turned back toward the city. "Ada," he said slowly, "when I discovered the truth, my first instinct was anger." She nodded silently. "But the more I thought about it, the more complicated everything became." Ada waited. "I realized something strange," he continued. "What?" "The woman I married didn't disappear when I learned the truth." Ada's brow furrowed slightly. "The same person who supported me during difficult times is still standing here," Chinedu said. "The same person who cared for my mother when she was sick. The same person who believed in me when my business almost collapsed during the recession." Ada's eyes filled with tears again. Chinedu continued speaking calmly. "You didn't fake those moments." "No," she whispered. "They were real." "Yes." He leaned against the railing again. "But the problem is, the truth should have come earlier." Ada nodded slowly. "I know. If you had trusted me enough to tell me before we married, things might have been different." Her voice was barely audible. "I was afraid." I understand that now, Chinedu said. The wind brushed gently across the balcony. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Chinedu finally turned fully toward her. I can't pretend that what happened doesn't hurt, he said. Ada looked up. But I also can't pretend that the love I felt for you suddenly vanished. Her breathing caught slightly. Chinedu continued. Marriage is not just about how a relationship begins. It's also about what people choose to do when the truth becomes uncomfortable. Ada stared at him. What are you saying? Chinedu exhaled slowly. I'm saying our marriage cannot continue the way it was before. A shadow passed across Ada's face. But that doesn't automatically mean it must end. She blinked in surprise. Chinedu's voice remained steady. If we continue this marriage, it will require something we didn't have before. What is that? Complete honesty. Ada nodded quickly. You'll have it. No more hidden pasts, he continued. No more unanswered questions. I promise, she said. And it will take time, Chinedu added. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. I understand. Ada wiped her eyes. For the first time in days, a small flicker of hope appeared in her expression. Chinedu looked at her quietly. I don't know what our future will look like, he admitted. But I do know something. What? The truth we're standing in now is real. Ada breathed slowly. And maybe, Chinedu said, that's where a real marriage actually begins. The city lights shimmered below them. The past could not be erased. The pain could not be undone. But for the first time since the secret had been revealed, they were no longer standing in silence. They were standing in truth. And sometimes truth, no matter how difficult, becomes the foundation for something stronger than illusion.